Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Carmine's Arena, a cultural gourmet of information, if you will, a feast for your mind and soul. And now, without further delay, the man, the myth, the maestro, Carmine Arena.
Greetings and welcome once again to Carmine's Arena, site of contest and conflict, venue for and of resolution. Resolution in terms of focus, remedy, and commitment, both yours and mine, to the preservation, the propagation, and indeed the celebration of Western civilization. If anyone suggests that one gets real, the reality is that the philosopher hears and responds differently to the challenge than, say, the psychologist. The philosopher will tend to answer in terms of abstract eternals, such as form and idea, while the psychologist will dabble in psychobabble, blathering away to cover for rabble by playing with legal forms of squabble. Not to mention the physicist, who'll wormhole his way to parallel universes to eventually abandon us to the calamities of the black holes of our cosmos. Oops, I said our cosmos. Now that would be some stretch for a deeply etched wretch like me. A wretch who'd rather continue to kvetch than, say, dialectically fetch. New? So what have I kvetched about in a comparatively considerable lifetime? Well, I bemoan and groan about the fact that we generally overthink and obsessively analyze all too many mysteries. Mysteries supposedly solved by overly egotistic and egoistic, self-serving types, all fired up to place a claim on certainty. A certainty stubbornly mocked by reality. For apart from our random and/or pettifogging ramblings, reality script continues to be relentlessly and indelibly writ, despite our edits, in spite of our snits. Yes, we the pale, moonlit, starlit twits, befitting the status nitwit, who inhabit and grow complicit with jaded thought, the thought ever arriving all too illicit, overwrought. For I've the pile of reality's notarized affidavits and forensic audits, which explicitly emits, so be it, so be it, cited here and submitted to disinvite bold arrogance of certainty, thus thereafter befitting the exit of dimwits and misfits smack off old reality's summits, where now having been crestfallen, certainty is helpless to outwit nor prohibit its well-earned discomforts. Certainty itself at last demoted in transit and revealed as naught but inanity. So says your pundit, ipsy dixit, for even dogma has gone to the dogs. I'll try to fix it. Dig it? So now, what should and must be dug into is the ultimate reality of innateness, which stands opposed to the social conceits of certainty. As daily practiced, certainty replaced instead by said innateness, that same innateness that shall have ever sustained the hallowed proposition that there is nothing more unequal than the equal treatment of unequals. The lawyers frown, the libertarians continue to expound, while yet again reality loyally writes its age-old script, a script which asserts equity as dual partner to its estranged equality, an estrangement fostered by attitude absent aptitude, filling and filing quotas to the last misbegotten iota, merit somehow finding discredit among liberal fetishists, mediocrity's doters. In this episode, number 101, let's also have 101 become an introductory course into the mystery, magic, and miracle of reality, avoiding altogether the politically potent mischief of certainty, certainty irrepressibly overturned by the qualities of innateness. Innateness now only comfortable with reality, but unimpeachably sustained by reality. In very fact, innateness being the central theme of reality's script. From the outset, let's attend to the thick fog of synonyms which accompany innateness, such as inborn, inbred, hereditary, congenital, and native. The fog lifts when we find the breath to blow away many more latent synonyms, away unto their separate zones and spheres of validity. Thereafter, respectfully appropriating each synonym for its very own distinctive nuance and an around meaning. Consequently, the best companion to innateness so far is its synonym inborn. For inborn strongly implies that something has been present since conception. For example, inborn intelligence, the unique gift of, say, perfect pitch, etc. The synonym inbred, as differentiated from inborn, is associated fairly regularly to something ingrained through earliest training, such as the love of reading, whereas hereditary refers to what is transmitted biologically, that is to say, genetically. Moreover, where the synonym congenital kicks in, it applies principally to characteristics, especially defects, acquired during fetal development, such as a congenital disease and the like. Some of these synonyms occasionally overlap and are used figuratively as in congenital liar, best exemplified by politicians who spread the defect to infect a voting bloc lacking innate, there's our word again, lacking innate intelligence, all too loosely called common sense. A rational sense rarely encountered, say, in all too many feminists who live by the racist Margaret Sanger's alcoholic admonition that women should find their inner slut, in which case congenital defect begins by predating, meaning epigenetically a child's actual conception, due to the epigenetic insult of external negative influences of mom's behavior, which impacts a child's eventual nesting place. Fetal innocence contaminated by sexually transmitted diseases, alcoholism, drug addiction, smoking, and bizarre eating habits. Take your pick or choose the whole menu of the aforementioned 5 entrees. After all, bad behavior means to imbue empowerment for females liberated to compound and confound their unborn child's looming congenital debilitation for generations to come. Many females do this innocently championing their daily diet of equality by ignoring a more nutritious diet of equity. Whereas all too many others bulk up and man up to indulge in gulping gender bender fare, a toxic fare which have newborns suffering withdrawal anguish. And so reality's script continues to get writ as feminists and their ilk continue to lose their grip by becoming hip, surrendering their innate femininity to feminist fantasies, given lip. Hence, synonyms, if I might summarize, such as inborn, inbred, hereditary, congenital, and native, don't quite fit our 101 introductory course definition of innateness, though inborn remains an excellent substitute. But let this be a friendly reminder about the careless use of synonyms. They become impostors who rob language of both clarity and definition, robbing each of refinement. That, again, is best exemplified by academic feminist methodology, which boasts that all ways of knowing are political, turning their collective heads away from innateness to politics, thus to emerge consummate liars, liars who sponsor and spawn congenital defect through neglect, and who toss off their sophisticate comments such as, "Oh, what the heck," and quickly adding, "I shall not be checked." On the other, cleaner hand, innateness should be proudly and tenderly held for oneself, and truly and most dutifully for one's offspring. Innateness itself steadily advancing apart from dire environmental influence and incremental calamity. If from the outset, Mom gave you her best, then you can well guess the rest. This was ever true even generations ago. Take for striking example Alexander Pope, who lived between the years 1688 and 1744. He was born in London to Roman Catholic family, born hale and hearty. But childhood sickness left him with stunted height, a curved spine, and ill health for the rest of his natural life. But his innateness, released unharmed by epigenetic insult, won him a celebrated life. Innateness left him whole, earned him fame and great financial success as a poet, satirist, and translator, who is best known among many other poetic accomplishments for his mastery of the heroic couplet. Excuse me, my allergy is acting up again. Also not to be forgotten was his singular gift for gardening and landscaping. Innateness, when given free rein, along with an epigenetic moral compass, can triumph and make us its heirs, heirs to our very own innateness. A present case in point is the great English physicist Stephen William Hawking, a giant mind who, though paralyzed and crippled, stares into the cosmos from his wheelchair to formulate the brief history of time. Ah, yes, but what have we to say about our own unused inborn aptitudes? Aptitudes currently all too frequently back-kicked when allowed to rest festering as victims. Victims on the government dole provided by politicians born and ineptly bred to become congenital liars who waste human fortitude and substance for power and privilege. Power and privilege we can take away and or tame by the mere employment and steady application of innate common sense. As innate and natural as, say, the universal aptitude humans possess for language itself, made up of sound, structure, and meaning, a trinity learned as early as our occupation of the cradle. Language, which forms an innate part and parcel of what I've called reality's script. This script bespeaks the human capacity for language as an inborn, innate imperative. To borrow a quote from the venerable Saint Francis of Assisi, start by doing what is necessary, then what is possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. A human's innateness, remember, is responsible for transforming this planet Earth into the world. The heralds of this transformation may be found far back when man was still supposedly primitive, found in caves where matchless cave paintings, realized with a primordial brush, dipped in blood and permanent vegetable dyes, swept us towards creativity, beauty, individualism and civilization, moving eventually from cave to cathedral. Yes, St. Francis was indeed correct when he recommended that we do what's necessary, suggesting thereby that we postpone self-gratification to go on to do what's possible. The merited reward ends by suddenly accomplishing the impossible. That in turn progressing to ever newer beginnings. As a self-confessed kvetch, I must ask what's happened to evolution, its Judeo-Christian dimension, its expression free of victimhood pretensions. For further examples of innateness raised to the nth degree, Noam Chomsky, who became quite significant figure in the science of linguistics, studying its potent qualities of innateness, not to mention Leonard Bernstein's 6 Norton lectures at Harvard, where he traversed the innateness to be found in the very grammar of music. Chomsky and Bernstein were discussed some 5 years ago in Carmine's Arena. Discussed in detail. Thus, I am compelled to invite you to make your own independent study, investigating, let's say, via Google or by the purchase of the Bernstein lectures, wherein he cites Chomsky and combines the innateness theories of music and speech. Quite plainly, the realities of innateness have also taught the human mind, heart, and spirit how to hold on to instinct. Instinct often lost in the aforementioned acts of overthinking. In short, innateness concurrently brings us to a keener understanding of our bad habits, the bad habit of ever-present error. For the richness of error is the depth of one's poverty. Poverty of mind, heart, and spirit, which surrenders instinct to the arrogance and ignorance of self-deception. I ask you to reflect and take note that all high drama from the great plays of ancient Greece and Rome and or present-day Broadway bespeaks and enacts tragedy, which is forever born of error. Our recorded history, in fact, can best be characterized as moments of man's time out of joint, drafted into chaos. Chaos alternatively stayed by God knows what. Maybe conservatism. Perhaps it's God's own steadier tempo. For to conserve is rarely, if ever, a bad activity, when instead the squandering of human instinct and the human condition is given over to the chaos of nihilism, nihilism paired with political narcissism. Error after addictive error. The chaos of war itself ultimately stayed and ironically betrayed by the regularity and perfect alignment of grave markers, row upon orderly row in military cemeteries. Cemeteries oftentimes situated directly on the site of some chaotic and savage battle where too many bodies fell to be returned home. Aside from the high drama of bloody tragedy born of error, conjoined with terror, we have comedy, also serendipitously inspired by error, which an act of innateness altered to a merrier corrective. For to laugh about ourselves is as theatrically instructive as to cry for ourselves. Each offers a promised catharsis. Yes, reality script continues to get writ, while we are busy making other plans, the enticing plans of mice and men, each spliced ad rem pro tem, that is to say, relevantly, if only temporarily. On a holier note, if you must ask, said the saintly Mother Teresa, why so much evil in the world? Then you must equally ask, said she, why so much good? Which again brings me back to those remarkable Cro-Magnon cave artists who validate what we were meant to be right up to the present moment. Who would have thunk it? My advice, spelunker it, but don't only cave, but brainwave, like those ancient artists did. Stand tall and brave for all the best there is to crave, and among that which to save, and about that which to rave. Our species has happily and hopefully enough innate capacity to transfix error and make it behave, holding error in place in order to transform it, commanding error itself to work on our behalf. At the very minimum, showing up error as a bad example, unworthy of emulation and or repetition. In the furtherance of this point, we cited earlier the science of epigenetics, which clinically and legitimately warns womanhood against activities which impact their future natal conceptions. Thanks to the feistiness of misguided monkey-see as monkey-do feminism, which in its last stages will be defined more by what it seriously lacked than by what it fatally retained. If you will permit my interrupting myself, I've often considered that it would be a good idea to add to the accompanied drug prescription inserts contraindications in bold type when referencing women of pregnable age. For quite obviously, these inserts are endlessly concerned with young females and not males, young or old. So much for there's no difference. Well, as I started to say a few sentences ago, I think it a good idea also to add the following warning for childbearing females. Avoid feminism. For overdose, seek immediate medical attention. Now, hear this. As with the said epigenetic behavior, we have the power to transfix and transform error, especially with regard to our faulty visual perception, whereupon we can supply motion to stationary objects. I refer to the phi phenomenon, a second sense corrective, if you will, whereby a fixed billboard filled with parallel rows of light bulbs is programmed to be independently turning the bulbs on and off, and to thereby create images that appear to be moving, and moving with figures virtually interacting with one another. This illusion is generated, as I say, by our so-called second sense. Innateness again at work, granting motion by suspending belief and granting open access to expectation. Yet the electrified billboard hasn't actually moved an inch. Similarly, we have the movies, where the phenomena flick of fusion takes still pictures and fuses them at a controlled speed to allow for what we expect, and that is motion, where there is none. Thus, we use the actual absence of motion to double-cross error itself, thus to conceive by the mind what we can't perceive by our senses. So stands the genius of mind over the evil genius of error. Such be the products of human innateness meant to frustrate imagination's limits. By the by, we also correct our optical defects with what the Greek builders and architects employed as when one looks up from the ground to a summit such as to the Parthenon in Athens. The columns from the 5th century BC, if they were really as perfectly straight as the shafts are made to appear, each would seem anything but straight. Were it not for each column swelling out midway up its full length, this is the use of what the Greeks called enthesis, employing the convex to avoid the misperceived concave. Look it up. Have fun with it. That's enthesis, E-N-T-A-S-I-S. Well now, should anyone in the future advise you to get real, you can tell them, if they have been listening to Carmine's Arena's course in Innateness 101, and or if they've deciphered reality script as decoded by Carmine Arena, that they're on the right track. Insist on telling the doubters that innateness is the source from which all being comes forth and gains admission into the collective we call culture. This ultimate reality, when properly engaged, generates individualism and Western civilization's gift to all mankind. Said individualism means to know and express the self in its unique gifts. It means finding one's own voice and reason for one's very own existence. Innateness, when realized, provides a first-class round-trip ticket to wisdom. An unpunched ticket is an awful waste, a waste which shall weigh heavily on yourself, your culture, and civilization itself. Yes, yes, when your ticky-wicky remains unpunched, you remain a truant from reality, an unidentifiable meshuggah, consigned to the black holes of meaning. And until next time, my friends, I invite you to examine your innateness, and by so doing, keeping faith with yourself.
If you have any comments or other remarks, and that I perhaps could even read on some of these broadcasts, please do not hesitate to write to me, Carmine Arena, P.O. Box 1029, Larchmont, New York 10538.